In 2011, and shortly after my absolute obsession with Demon's Souls, there was considerable hype surrounding the new From Software IP. This game was separated from the Demons series, yet still folded on with the Souls lineup, and we saw the build-up, tease, and eventual release of Dark Souls, the spiritual successor of Demon's Souls. The latter of which is success both in terms of sales and critical reception helped launch this fantastic title that has since been lauded as one of the greatest and most influential games and game series of all time. As a result, Dark Souls now has created a game category of its own, Souls-like, and with this game effectively being the progenitor of it all. Some argument can be made that Demon's Souls started this genre, however I would disagree and state that the primary difference between the two is the air quote open world and interconnectivity of the world in comparison to Demon's Souls. Nonetheless, the success of this game had ushered in 2 additional Souls iterations, starting with Dark Souls 2 and currently ending with Dark Souls 3, and this game itself has even seen a remastered version, although there is a fair amount of controversy surrounding that. Dark Souls' focus remains relatively the same as Demon's Souls previously and sets the trends for the ones that follow it, with its gameplay revolving around exploring areas, killing enemies and bosses, collecting key items to open up pathways in order to collect more important items to reach the end goal and complete the game to whichever ending you prefer. Of course, that's a gross oversimplification, and there's a lot more nuance to the world and the story that we the player can uncover to our heart's content. I consider myself extremely lucky to have been able to be an established and mature person when this game and the series were released. I was a fresh-faced young adult and had a reasonable amount of spare time when work and university were part-time. I found myself able to fill that spare time with Dark Souls and could truly appreciate the time, effort, and could soak in the wonder I found myself in while playing it. I wasn't too young to misunderstand or take for granted its impact, and I wasn't too old that it no longer interested me. At any rate, this video will serve as a medium in which I discuss many aspects of the original Dark Souls Prepare to Die version, including the DLC that came with it. I will endeavour to explore the good, the bad and the ugly, if there are any, the story, the music, the environment, the enemies, the bosses, as well as other things, and of course draw comparisons where possible between the games before and after it in the franchise. Of course, throughout this video there will be sections in which I discuss what I am doing in the game and give small tips, tricks and pieces of advice or whatever information may be helpful during gameplay. I'm not going to be showing every minute and aspect of this game, as that would take dozens of hours to break down, commentate and analyse, so just be aware of that. And this video doesn't serve as a walkthrough, let's play or guide of any kind. This is simply a minor analysis and commentary of Dark Souls. Well, we've all seen this a dozen times over, a staple once again in every single one of these Souls games where you, again as the name suggests, create your character. We have the traditional male and female gender rather than the new progressive body type. A sign of the times perhaps, well who really knows, but at the very least, this game, unlike Demon's Souls, actually allows male gendered characters to wear female form-fitting clothing and vice versa. Great! I actually really hated how clothing was gender specific. In a role-playing game, if armor is useful, I want to wear it. I couldn't give a shit if it's a bra and panties or a muscle tee with booty shorts. The character creation menu is, well, fine enough, and it's here where we're able to choose our sex, class, physique, face, or effective race or birthplace of origin, and some details here and there, and a gift. Ugh, here we go. In the Demon's Souls commentary video, I stated that we have the standard for character creation where we input our name and choose from a range of different classes, each with a gift that you can select. Thankfully, there are none that are broken, although the ring is a point of contention, such as the likes of Dark Souls 1's Master Key. Well, here it is, the Master Key. It's widely considered the best choice of gift in almost every single scenario, and up until patch 1.05, which by the way came out a full 2.5 months after release, you could not obtain it naturally and could only get it by picking the Thief class or choosing the gift itself. It is a universal opener to every basic lock in the game, which includes, but is not limited to, shortcuts, basements, sewers, cages, cells, and even an area near a bonfire. For all intents and purposes, it's an extremely handy tool for exploration and some goodies earlier on, so why would you even really consider the others? However, in saying that, the only other ones that you could convince me to bother about really is the Old Witch's Ring, the Black Fire Bombs, and the Tiny Being Ring. This is because the old witch's ring is a real pain in the ass to get, and it helps with the covenant, but at quite a large cost later on in the game. The black fire bombs, because of the strength of the fire bombs, help with earlier bosses, and the tiny being ring as passive HP over time is really handy, and it appears much later on in the game rather than earlier. Now that we've finished creating our character, we can continue onwards and be given a rundown of the game's story. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a lot as these analytical commentaries progress, but the story is being shown to us right here in this introduction. I would like to preface this section by saying that some people are turned off from this game by there not being a typical story progression built in, and some people even wonder if there's a story to be witnessed at all. Well, yeah, there is, but it's a rich and complex story that's hidden beneath layers of text and subtext, so for some people beating these games is as much about uncovering the narrative than it is about smashing the bosses. As a result, in such a rich and complex story, there's bound to be mistakes I make and things I miss, so please bear with me here. Basically, in the beginning, there was a fog with not much there except arched trees and everlasting dragons. Eventually, fire apparated into existence, and from there we got opposites. Hot and cold, life and death, light and dark. With the dark came powerful beings that found something called the Soul of Lords. There was Nito, the first of the Undead, who found the Soul of Death, the Witch of Izalith and her daughters with the Soul of Life, and Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, with the Soul of Light, but there was one more, the Furtive Pygmy. The Furtive Pygmy is such a lore twist and a head fuck that at some points I barely even understand, but basically they found the Dark Soul itself, shattered it into countless pieces to create humans and humanity. This can be connected to the end of Dark Souls 3 with Gale, but that conversation comes much later on. Using these incredibly powerful souls, Nito, the Witch, and Gwyn ran a coup against the dragons, and one of the dragon's own, Seath, betrayed them to side with Gwyn, and a new age was born. The Age of Fire. As all fires do, they eventually fade, and this is effectively where we see ourselves. You see, we're amongst the smouldering embers of a world that is burning out. Littering that world are those cursed with a dark sign, an undead curse that appears primarily on humans, whereby you're afflicted to never die. As you are afflicted, you keep coming back, slowly losing your humanity the more you resurrect. Your job, or our job, is to aim to break that cycle and usher in a new age of fire, or put those last embers out and bring in the age of darkness. But note that this world is cyclical and our decisions are mostly linked to the fire, as souls are life, and life is fire. Without flame, there is no life. Also, it is worth mentioning that it doesn't matter what your choice is in this game, it really doesn't affect the beginnings of Dark Souls 2 or 3. Whew, that was a lot. The story is actually far more in-depth than that, with a lot of characters, both minor and major, being influenced by which age or lord soul holder they align with, and you can either turn their favour or bring on their ire. For what it's worth, the story is fine. It's sort of like a puzzle. And the game does a pretty damn good job at enabling us to explore, uncover, and solve as much of this puzzle as we want. So, for context, a large portion of the world can be uncovered through reading descriptions of items throughout the game and dialogue from NPCs, of which it is very difficult to do in one playthrough or summarise in such a short video.
The dark sign brands the undead. And in this land, the undead are corralled and led to the north. Where they are locked away to await the end of the world. This is your fate.
Dark Souls deviates from its predecessor in its tutorial only by name and not really much else. You see, in Demon Souls you can skip the Run to the Nexus section, which effectively signposts it as a formal tutorial. Here in Dark Souls there's no way to skip the introduction section of the game that can be labelled a tutorial, and for the sake of this discussion I'll just refer to it hereforth as a tutorial. For the most part, it is similar in almost every iteration of the Soul franchise, but it's here we really start to see a difference between Demon and Dark Souls. The tutorial gives you ample opportunity to learn the basics of the game, and in fact there's a lot more here to cover than in Demon Souls. From the get-go we learn how to interact with the environment, first up picking an object off of a corpse, and finally using that collected object to open the door in front of us. I don't necessarily think that those small little lessons like this are unimportant or misplaced, because it sort of allows our brains to correlate the shiny things on a corpse with being something that may benefit us. The room in front of us has bright orange interactable things on the ground that gives us messages which tell us stuff. Further running down the corridor allows you to attack these two hollow enemies, showcasing both regular and heavy attacks. We also get to see our mediocre damage output, and it's at this time we spot that our weapon is actually broken. Shortly afterwards we run into a bonfire, and that teaches us that if for some reason you took damage up until this point, this is a place of rest and recovery, and it gives us a small menu to engage with. We enter a door and find ourselves encountering a boss, but because our weapon is broken and sucky, we're incentivized to move on and find a way to escape. If you have black firebombs here, you can easily kill the demon and move onward. You'll also get a nice little hammer as a reward if you do. We have a chance to learn how projectiles work in this game and the timing we need to dodge them. We grab an upgrade on our defensive and offensive arsenal and dispose of an enemy who can finally fight back. Here we encounter a fog door, an indicator that there is a physical barrier between the sections of levels or areas. Continuing upstairs, we get shown an ambush with the rolling iron ball and discover that the world has hidden bits and pieces that can be exposed through interacting with the environment as we can walk through this newfound hole. An NPC awaits us, and this is Oscar. He provides us with utensils to aid our journey and push forward.
Oh, and this.
Then our final couple of lessons are understanding that the areas have shortcuts, learning to manage small crowds, and even learning how to deal with defensive enemies either through strafing or parrying. Finally, the plunging attack, a powerful move to deal with enemies below you, and a new addition to these games. We put our plunging attack to good use and engage the aforementioned boss, the Asylum Demon, and battle him to the death. So, we're about to exit this jail and head to the world below that awaits us. Overall, we learn a hell of a lot in such a small number of interactions and time within this informal tutorial. The journey to the mainland is, for all intents and purposes, a wonderful way for us to get the hang of things. Death is not all that punishing just yet, and we've been given fantastic resources to help us advance. Honestly, I could spend 30 minutes on the tutorial alone and how important that these lessons can be, even with the additional things that we learn, but that can be saved for another time.
Only in the ancient legends it is stated that one day an undead shall be chosen. To leave the undead asylum in pilgrimage to the land of the ancient lords. Lordran.
Unlike Demon Souls before and Elden Ring that follows it, there's no separated area that can be considered a central hub. Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 all have central quote-unquote hubs that serve as points of return when you've exhausted all your paths in a given direction. It also acts as a place for rescued and discovered NPCs to wander, so you've got access to merchants and the like. Around the shrine are little bits and pieces like this elevator that help reconnect areas back here. Shortcuts, I think, if you will. This is Firelink Shrine, a great place to talk about the core basics. See, the bonfire here is more powerful than normal ones, as is indicated by the additional Estus flasks we gain upon resting at it. See? From 1 to 10. And if we take a quick walk downstairs, we see a lady, silent as the night, sitting behind the bars right underneath the fire. This is a firekeeper. There are 3 firekeepers within this game. One is here, one in Anor Londo, and the other in Quilag's domain. And each bonfire they occupy is 1 tier more powerful than the standard. They also have the ability to strengthen our Estus flasks by using a firekeeper soul on any one of them. Each bonfire in the game has a total of 4 tiers, and you as a player have access to the first 2 immediately upon entering the world. A tier can be noted by 2 things. 1, how intense the actual fire on the bonfire is, and 2, how many Estus one gets upon resting. Tier 1 gives you 5 charges, Tier 2 gives you 10, Tier 3 15, and you guessed it, Tier 4 20. The World of Dark Souls is set up in such a way that you can technically rush down to the catacombs past all of the skeletons and defeat a boss named Pinwheel to obtain a Rite of Kindling. This allows you to charge up a bonfire to Tiers 3 and 4, so that's exactly what I do, as is evident by the footage that I have here. I'm actually going to talk about sequencing and interconnectivity really soon. Well, whatever. After claiming my prize and homeward boning my way back to Firelink Shrine, which I assure you is much more of a pain in the ass than you think, I can continue talking about the basics. Alright, buckle up, there's going to be a lot right off of the bat, and bear with me here because these next 2 sections lay the foundation of a fair bit of commentary and analysis, so we can expand from here. The bonfires, as lightly touched upon before, do a few things right off of the bat and expand as your journey does. They're designed to rest at primarily, which replenishes your health to full, restores all of your Estus charges, and even restores your status effects, except for Curse. It is also, uniquely, the method that you use to level up. This is something that's unique to both Dark Souls 1 and Elden Ring. You see, Demon Souls has the Candle Maiden, Dark Souls 2 has the Emerald Herald, Dark Souls 3 has the Firekeeper, and hell, even Bloodborne has the Doll in the Hunter's Dream. At any rate, it allows you to rekindle the bonfire and upgrade it a tier and reverse your hollowing, so that's what I'm doing right now to demonstrate. Those cute little numbers to the top left of your health bar are indicators of how much humanity you have stored. Your humanity collection has a bunch of different uses, and as you can see me demonstrate now, you're able to use it to reverse hollowing and kindle the bonfire to provide you with additional charges. Humanity can come in 2 different forms. One is called hard humanity, I think, whereby you collect it as an actual item you can consume, and the second is called soft humanity, where rarely you'll kill an enemy and you'll see a black mist absorb into your body. See? Counter went up by 1. Using solid or hard humanity can heal your character too, which is actually pretty neat. Having more humanity gives you a couple of bonuses like additional chaos flame damage, resistance to curse, increased item discovery rate, as well as increased physical and elemental resistances. Therefore, stacking humanity isn't a wholly bad idea, but having too much and dying before you can collect your souls will see them all disappear. As you can see, my Estus charges are increased by 5 each time, but the bonfire also lets us store items, upgrade and repair equipment, change our magic spells and warp, but that's not until much later on. Continuing on, the health and stamina bar. Do I really need to explain the purpose of these? Well, if I must. The health bar indicates how much health one has and can be increased by leveling your vitality. It effectively, much like an Estus flask, represents how many mistakes you're allowed to make before you die. Either one giant mistake can undo you, or a lot of smaller ones without correcting them. The stamina bar indicates how much movement your character can do that involves extra input. Dashing, slashing, rolling, jumping, sprinting, among other things, and it can be increased by leveling your endurance. The menu, or heads-up display, accessible by pressing the start button, is okay. Honestly, it feels a little bit archaic, but that could just be my opinion coming into this game as future games improve upon the menuing each time. I dare say it'll ever be perfect, as what constitutes a perfect menu really? It does the job well enough. Our first option is our inventory, which has categories that occupy the sides. We have consumables or miscellaneous, ore, keys, spells, shields and weaponry, projectiles, armor and rings. Easy enough. I would argue that there are a lot of button presses to get where you want to go, but honestly, mostly you use this to consume a soul or read text, so meh. We don't use it in the heat of battle. Pressing R1 takes us to our equipment, where we can, well, equip our items as well as our quick use items. Next, our character stats, which, as the name implies, shows us our character stats. It details our level, defense and resistances, max HP and stamina and spell attunement, and finally the menu, options and etc. Not really much else to it. In the tutorial section we got told by Oscar, the dying gentleman, that
There is an old set, thou who art undead art chosen, and thine exodus from the undead asylum maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords, when thou ringeth the bell of awakening. Well, now you know.
well, simple enough really. Oscar and his family task 1 to journey from the asylum to the mainland and ring the bell of awakening. Except he only mentions one bell. However, the crestfallen knight who's already made it to the mainland states that
There are actually 2 bells of awakening. One's up above in the Undead church. The other is far, far below, in the ruins at the base of Blighttown. Ring them both, and something happens. Brilliant, right?
the implication here is that the cycle of ringing the bell or bells of awakening has been going on for eons, but again, I will endeavour to talk about the story later on. At any rate, our immediate goal right now is to go to 2 areas. 1 is the Undead church above, and 2 through the depths and underground to Blighttown to ring the bells of awakening and see what happens. Ah, fantastic! This is a perfect little section of the game to highlight what Dark Souls as a series does best. Right here on the narrow expanse we have 3 fellas throwing firebombs at us. Now let's see if they can hit us with them. Ah, fuck, yep, they can. As at least for now I have no way of dealing with the firebomb chuckers, I must see them as a hazard to be wary of. If we look through the doorway we spot an undead, meaning that we're going to be running past a hazard and into another hazard, and we'll be sandwiched by danger. We have to be wary of our surroundings and plan ahead carefully. All of this decision making, for the most part, happens pretty instantly to the player, and they will instinctively come up with a creative way to deal with these problems. You see, Dark Souls teaches players how to react quickly and carefully to the environment that they're put in. There are a few ways we can actually deal with this situation. We can bait an undead out and run back near the bonfire to deal with them one-on-one, or we can charge in and take the ones in the room at the same time, or charge in and try to separate them in the small room to minimize danger and protect ourselves from the firebombs. I'm actually going to talk about AI and approaching the world danger soon. Right here we get to use the master key to gain some pine resin to apply to our weapons. If you don't have the master key, you can actually buy the residence key from the merchant in the Undead Burg to open this door. The master key, as shown here, also opens shortcuts, and I won't go down there right now because a formidable opponent awaits me at the bottom of these stairs, but suffice to say that this is a little, quote-unquote, shortcut. Progressing onwards, we approach a fog door, and luckily I know what to do, so I clean the top parapet of the 2 crossbow undead and walk down the battlements to run into our very first main game boss, or is this a mini-boss? Either way, after clearing him, we find an NPC, Solera Vestora. This famous gentleman, known for his jolly cooperation, gives us a white soapstone which allows for online multiplayer. He's also a summonable NPC to help with specific boss fights, and I'm going to aim to touch on the online aspects of the game pretty soon. The bridge here, guarded by a drake, will breathe fire at you, but the underneath of this bridge holds a neat little shortcut, a ladder we can kick down. This ladder connects to the Undead Burg bonfire, so we're actually easily able to ignore all of that crap we just ran through. Frustratingly, as I keep going forward, I get poisoned by a rat here, which really drains my resources as I try to progress through the level. Status effects and how they harm the player will be spoken about shortly. However, as I get to the Parish and dispose of the Heavy Knight and collect a Firekeeper's soul, we get a shortcut in the form of an elevator, something that I mentioned moments ago during the Firelink Shrine section. This wonderful contraption leads us right back to Firelink Shrine so we can rest at the bonfire and continue our journey with our resources fully stocked. Heading to the left past the Channeler, we find an NPC locked in a cell. His name is Lautrec. I used the mystery key I found to unlock the cell, but the master key actually also works here too. He's another NPC with a quest, and as a result can be quite damaging to players if not done properly. I'm actually going to talk about NPCs and quests later on at a more poignant moment. Finally, we get to the top of the parish, right next to the belfry, and on the floor we see a glorious golden sign. Solaire. We can summon him just like he mentioned earlier.
But I am a warrior of the sun. If you miss it, you must be blind.
This right here is the boss, or bosses, of the Undead Parish, and the first major obstacle in our Bell of Awakening, the Bell Gargoyles. I watched Solaire absolutely dismember him with his lightning spear, and I play like an absolute chump and die. But fear not, I remember Solaire's lightning did some juicy damage, so I'm going to apply the same element to my weapon to do the exact same. Success! This is our first major boss, and at a later moment I'll talk about bosses and boss design, but for now we can celebrate the victory by finishing 50% of our initial goal in this world. So our next stop is way below in the city of Blighttown. This is perfect as it gives us a chance to really talk about the interconnectivity and sequencing of the world of Lordran. First off, let's discuss and set the scene for what interconnectivity really means, because Dark Souls 1 really blows my mind and sets the benchmark for interconnectivity that the other two Souls games wish they could emulate. However, it has some moments of not so interconnectivity, but luckily these happen sort of at the end of the game. Okay, this part's going to be a little weird as it's more of an off-the-cuff discussion and exploration of the world as we see it in this 3D model viewer. Dark Souls 1 was complemented by the inability to teleport or warp, for at the very least the first 40 to 50% of the game. As a result, the designers needed to accommodate the player by having a world circle back on itself, therefore being interconnected. Firelink Shrine, as mentioned before, is the hub of this game and is regarded as a place of safety and comfort. Deviating from this path is the danger, and the crestfallen warrior at the beginning signposts the directions we need to take. Thus, it's now up to us which direction we travel. Mind you, not every part of the world right now is interconnected despite seeming as if it is. This is what makes some of those places like Ash Lake and Catacombs so frightening in the beginning of the game, and it's because the general rule is the further down you go, the further from safety you are. In the instance of Ash Lake and the Catacombs, you're progressing to an area with zero connections back to the hub. There are a myriad of directions we can head, and I keep finding bits and pieces even now that sit in the recesses of my mind. Some of the paths that you can take that loop back to Firelink Shrine are as follows, but are not limited to Firelink Shrine to Undead Burg to Undead Parish back to Firelink Shrine, Firelink Shrine to Undead Burg to Undead Parish to Darkroot Garden to Undead Burg back to Firelink Shrine, Firelink Shrine to New Londo Ruins to Valley of the Drakes to New Londo Ruins to Firelink Shrine, Firelink Shrine to New Londo Ruins to Blighttown to the Depths to Undead Burg back to Firelink Shrine. And finally, Firelink Shrine to Undead Burg to Darkroot Garden back to Undead Burg and then back to the Firelink Shrine. Some of the paths that you can take but don't loop back were mentioned before. Firelink Shrine to New Londo Ruins to Blighttown to Ash Lake, because the journey out of Ash Lake is absolutely fucking horrendous. And Firelink Shrine to the Catacombs, to Pinwheel, and the trek back up is really painful but a lot more doable. How does all that grab you? As we can see, some of the places within the game are ludicrously connected. Another example of just how connected the world is how visible it is, seemingly having no loading barriers separating them. From Firelink Shrine, we can peer down into the abyss to see Blighttown itself. In fact, Quilag's domain, our next destination, is coincidentally almost directly below us. Unfortunately, the interconnectivity does not extend into the entire game. Our goal right now is to ring the second bell of awakening, but after that we gain a new task. These new tasks are allocated to us in the area beyond the bell's purpose, where we finally unlock warping/fast travel. At that point, the area has become more linear and spread out from the locations we've already visited to facilitate our newfound ability to travel instantly back to a hub. I must add though, Dark Souls 1 is leagues ahead of Dark Souls 2 and 3 with the way that the world connects. The other two are far more linear, with you having to start at point A, to run to point B, then to C, and finally to D, only to teleport or warp back to A to do it all over again from the get-go. For the most part, Dark Souls 1 is a pretty cohesive dream. Side note, the Cupra Demon is fucking bullshit, but not because of the boss itself, but because the game actively tries to put you in the smallest room possible with two fucking annoying enemies. The dogs are by far and large my most hated enemy in the game, and either way we need the key from the Cupra Demon to go into the depths. As you can see by the footage flying by, there are two ways that I show you can access Blighttown. One of them is through the depths after the Cupra Demon, and then after the Gaping Dragon boss fight, and the other one is from the designed exit from Blighttown. We can only do this latter route with the master key, however. The only reason I assume it's an exit is that we actually get a new Londo Ruins key from a chest here to be able to use past the enemies that we just ran through. The sequencing within Dark Souls 1 is actually quite complex, and this is because you have a choice of which direction to go, as I mentioned before. The way that the world connects back on itself is only possible because of how relatively logical and tight-knit everything is, and as a result of this, the early game's open-ended design, there are always better pieces of armor, weapons, or more interesting items in any given direction. There is, however, a quote-unquote expected route, but experienced players like myself might choose to make that run to Pinwheel to make Estus more available, or might even head to the Darkroot Gardens and try their luck for the Black Knight Halberd first. Players who know the world might actually choose to do Quilag first rather than the Undead Parish to make the trips to Sens Fortress a little faster. The way that you approach the first half of the game is completely up to you. I opt to take the easier route to the bottom of Blighttown because I truly am not that interested in exploring it at all. I fucking hate Blighttown. Regardless, we make it to the bottom of Blighttown with relative ease and get invaded by man-eater Mildred, so we can't yet light this bonfire. Disposing of her, which really isn't that difficult, lets us rest and regain our resources, and from here it's just a short run through the poison muck to Quilag, the next major boss in our way. But before I phase to her, I want to talk about status ailments. There are 4 in this game, and I'm going to show you 3 because fuck the 4th one right to hell. First and second are poison and toxic. In order to gain these ailments, one must be damaged by a creature or weapon that has it applied to it. Both do damage over time, with toxic being the stronger of the two. Just have a look at the difference between the damage of poison and toxic over 10 seconds. The third status effect is bleed. This is where you have a bleed meter that fills up, and once it hits, a full fixed percentage of your health is chunked away. Finally, there's curse. You can see my meter here. Getting cursed is when your meter hits full and you instantly die and your maximum HP is cut by 50%. Curse used to be extremely broken because breaking it was far from easy, purging stones were few and far between and expensive, and your health used to be cut in half, then quartered, then an eighth, then a 16th. They changed this to be a maximum of an eighth after patch 1.05, the same patch coincidentally as the master key being sold. Ah, Queelag. This fight goes as well as you would expect. Honestly, she isn't that difficult at all. If you keep your distance, watch from the lava, you can slowly chip away at her health. Interestingly enough, if you hug her spider face, she barely even touches you with her sword, and when she lays down, you can smack her and she'll stop her attack. Now that our last obstacle is done, we can ring this damn bell and be done with the final 50% of our initial goal. Yep, the consequences of my actions. As I mentioned before during the end of my Undead Burg / Parish section, that loud trek can be quite damaging to players if not dealt with correctly. Well, clearly I didn't do it correctly, and therefore the Firekeeper is dead and her soul is on the floor with a black eye orb as a calling card. Look, I'm going to spoil it here because I didn't cover it before, but Lautrec is the one who killed her. After being rescued, although if you beat the Bell Gargoyles, he'll exit himself anyways. He'll sit opposite her and make comments about her. You see, he's an assassin, but he can also give you information. For example, he implies heavily that Petrus of Thurland, that goofy-ass priest we met at Firelink Shrine, has abandoned or lured Rhea and the apostles that go with her to the catacombs, leaving them to die and taking their humanity. At any rate, we can't use Firelink Shrine Bonfire until we correct our mistake, which will be a little sooner than we think, but probably a little bit further on than I really want it to be. This right here, the ringing of the second bell, marks a point in the game where NPC quests, both discovered and undiscovered, progress. For example, Lautrec moves, Rhea goes to the catacombs with the apostles, Sigmar appears in front of Sens fortress, Laurentius can be killed, Quilana will appear in Blighttown if you've leveled a pyromancy flame, Griggs will move to Firelink Shrine if rescued, to search for Logan, and Patches and Solaire will move. Now, we head to Sens fortress. Good God, here we go. Really quickly, have a look at this absolute nightmare. This right here highlights a point I made a bit earlier with the firebomb fellas in the Undead Burg about how Dark Souls teaches you how to manage your surroundings and enemies. I clearly haven't learned, and now I have found myself in a position where I'm facing two enemies that hit quite hard, have high defense, and have a fair chunk of HP. My goal right here, and a point I want to make, is that you need to be careful in the ways that you approach enemies. Even the smallest and simple enemies can overwhelm you and kill you quite easily. Case in point, these undead flame wielders. Notice how I just went in swinging and they took me down? Well, don't do that. This game is designed for you to take advantage of enemies in one-on-one scenarios. Notice how much easier I find it to kill the second snake man once the first is dead. Yeah, me too. Sen's fortress is, as the name implies, a fortress owned by Sen. No, I'm just kidding. But it is indeed a fortress by definition. It is fortified by pressure plate dart traps, giant swinging axes, ambushing enemies, boulder traps, precarious walkways and ledges, long drops and fireball traps from giants. Not shown, however, are two different types of traps. The first is an elevator spike trap and the next is a mimic. Lovely. Our job, and indeed your job in every single area of this game, is to safely navigate it from one point to the other, and Sens hit you with this all at once. When you pass through a couple of times, it becomes second nature as to how the axes swing, or how much time you have between boulders, where the enemies are, and for the most part, how to dodge dart traps. Ugh. The enemy AI throughout this area is pretty much indicative of most of the game. Well, I suppose that sentence can be said anywhere really, as the AI have all but one function: to kill you. Sometimes it can be really janky, I guess. Regardless, the fortress displays this in a manner that is different from what we've seen so far, as it serves as a turning point in challenge not only against the enemy AI, but the environment and the world itself. You see, from here on, throughout your journey, you will approach precarious walkways, you'll need to time runs and jumps correctly, you'll have to dodge more traps and be wary of collapsing floors and lethal falls, and you'll have to navigate enemies around the environment to suit combat. Sometimes you'll have to do all of these at the same time. I just find that this area, at least for the uninitiated or new, can be quite unfair, as it's a steep learning curve from what players will have likely experienced. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as you can adapt to your surroundings, but I think it could have been done better. Perhaps a bit less enemy HP or more shortcuts to the area. Also, exploring it isn't really worth the reward. Well, actually that might not be strictly true, but it is for the most part a huge pain in the ass to get to the absolute ground floor, and the enemies' health and damage they have are too ludicrous for the level you'll approach Sen's fortress at. For context, I'm level 50 here with a +5 longsword. I popped every soul I had except boss souls and even farmed a little, and I still only do 44 damage with a heavy attack. Then again, this is a strictly melee build and I'm not using any elemental damage, so take from that whatever you will. At the top of this fortress of shite stands a giant who has, for quite some time now, been chucking fireballs at us. He will continue to rain down fire and death during the boss fight of this area if not dealt with. Therefore, we can approach this in two different ways. Firstly, we can grin and bear it during the boss fight, or secondly, we can convince him to pass away and save us some trouble. Because I'm a nice guy, instead I convince him to take the day off, and he acquiesces. Now we can engage in the boss battle with the man, the myth, the legend, Iron Tarkus. But before I do, a quick detour. There's an NPC hidden here shortly after a jump in a tower, and at the bottom of this tower we get the cage key, which can free an NPC named Big Hat Logan. I did this before with the master key because, you know, that thing is fucking incredible. But I know what you might be thinking. Why even get the cage key if you chose the master key? Listen, I'm just exploring. This NPC here sells Titanite and Green Titanite. This new version of Titanite can be used to improve ascended weapons, and these are weapons imbued with like fire or divine or whatever else. Throughout your game you'll come across a couple of other different coloured Titanite slabs or chunks or whatever, and there's white and blue and red and whatnot, but generally I only deal with the originals. Now we can head back to Iron Tarkus and see him in action. As we sit here and watch Tarkus beat the snot out of the Iron Golem all by himself, we can chat about something, and that something is NPC summons. For the most part, they're pretty arse. They merely serve as a distraction, really. I mean, Soleil got absolutely minced by the Gaping Dragon, and Mildred was shish kebab by Quelaag, but Iron Tarkus is built different. His armor set, the Black Iron set, has enormous defense, and some data digging shows that he has a +10 greatsword. He is, in my opinion, the only reliable NPC summon in the game when it comes to actual combat prowess. It's actually a shame that it's only once. It hurts to say that with Solaire here, but it's true, really. At the very least, Solaire can hold his own against Ornstein and Smo and takes little lava damage during the Centipede Demon. I see Tarkus as the machine to get things done, and Solaire as the bloke who always has my back but can never carry me onwards. At least we can all agree on one thing, and that is that the NPC summons have absolutely horrible AI. I'm not exactly sure how they're programmed, but sometimes I see them do nothing but run around getting slogged by the bosses they aim to attack. They attack at the worst times, never defend, roll right into danger. At least Tarkus can soak the damage like a champ. We've made it to Anor Londo, the hometown of Gwyn and a couple of other major players in the story, and where the game takes an important turn. I gaze up at a building on a mountain. That is the Duke's Archives, and a place we can go, and you might have seen that in the map thingy I did a bit ago. You might be asking me the questions, hey, why don't you go over there? Or why not keep going in the catacombs after Pinwheel? Well, Anor Londo is the reason why. I shall explain shortly. Take the elevator down, run forward and kill the Bell Gargoyle, an enemy we faced as a boss earlier in the game, signposting our progress. We run forward and think, what the fuck do? We hit a dead end, but we spot a very thin walkway going to a building on the left. Quick note, I fucking hate how the camera jars to the side as you walk through the underpass. Sens Fortress at least prepped us for these narrow walkways with enemies, but luckily the enemies here are even dumber than a sack of rocks. Again, the AI is designed to kill us with seemingly little self-preservation in there. This is a recurring theme in the game. Anyway, getting back to what I wanted to discuss before about the Duke's Archives. Our job here is to collect the Lord Vessel. The Lord Vessel is the key that unlocks those additional areas. You see, if I was to have turned left in Anor Londo, or continued past Pinwheel to the Tomb of the Giants, or gone past Quelaag through the lava and downwards, I would have been met with a golden fog door unlike any other we see. This urine-coloured door can't be bypassed unless we lay the Lord Vessel down under Firelink Shrine. That will open the paths for us. However, connecting to our sequencing section before, there is one Lord Soul Holder that can be fought prior to gaining the Lord Vessel, and I'm going to talk about them a little as I kill them. But for now, that's why we're here. We just don't know it yet. Look at this shit. I get fucking domed across the map and forced off of the walkway. Great. Sens Fortress didn't prep me for that bullcrap. Side note, I find a lot of things unfair to inflate difficulty here and there. I've noticed a lot in this game that the input reading can be crazy at times. I was in between recordings at the time, but the enemies such as the dogs jump and dodge all sorts of swings you do, and situations like this where you get spammed with enemies that take minimal damage, have huge mobility on small walkways with tracking projectiles is just frustrating. We finally get the fucker though and move into the safe ground into Anor Londo, and who do we see? Solaire again.
Oh,
Anor Londo is another turning point in a lot of NPC questlines, and we'll spot another one very shortly. Hidden behind a fireplace is a room with all of these chests, but one of them is moving and has a much straighter chain. So I hit it, and it turns out it's a mimic. This is usually one of the first 2 or 3 mimics we see in the game, but Anor Londo have quite a lot. We catch up with Sigurd here, and he's annoyed that the Silver Knights are annoying him, so we unannoy him and kill them. And he rewards us with the tiny being ring, a gift we could have selected in the character creation menu. I just want to point out here that the character creation fucking flat out lies. It does not recover HP slowly. It gives you 5% increase in maximum health, and that's it. I didn't address this in the character creation section, but why is that there? Didn't they check it? Or did they translate it from Japanese wrong? Like seriously, what's the explanation for this blatant lie? A black eye orb that we picked up off of the corpse of the Firekeeper and in Firelink Shrine quivers, and before I get into that, I spot the turning wheel to open the main doors, giving me yet another shortcut. This is effectively a straight line from the Firekeeper in Anor Londo to the boss room up ahead. On the left, or right side of the stairs, I suppose, depending on perspective, we meet the beloved giant blacksmith. This bloke's actually far more useful than Andre in the Parish. He's somewhat close to a bonfire, sells some great items, great armor, solid weapons, and a large range of titanite, and can upgrade your materials. There's an implication here that this bloke and Hawkeye Goff know each other, as he has the Hawk ring right behind him. In the DLC, Goff asks if he is still hammering away, and they're obviously both giants. Now back to the quivering after refilling my resources. This right here is Lautrec and company. He is the one who killed the Fire Maiden, and we're here to get revenge. Back in 2011, and even not long after that, this always seemed like a really tough fight, given that you can't heal at all as a spirit of revenge. Joke's on them though, because humanity can heal me, bitch, but honestly, I think I might have gotten lucky. This fight was not that brutal at all. I basically kept running around in circles, separating them and stabbing Lautrec as he came down the stairs, because he'd missed me with his swings. Also, he has no shield, so he can't defend himself. And the spear bloke never really leaves his side, so he cops a bit of it too. Lautrec is now dead, and we can restore Firelink back to how it was. Thank God. Prepping for the boss, I clear these 2 annoying fucks by circling around them forever and using the extra humanity to heal to save my Estus, and I summon our boy Solaire for a fantastic 2v2. This is Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo. Is it Smo or Smoff? I mean, I can get why people say Smoff because Goff calls himself Goff. But in Japanese it's meant to be Sumo, so who really knows? I really want to talk about boss battles now, but I'm actually going to wait till a bit later on. Let me just say this though. Out of the entire FromSoft library for this genre, that includes Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, Ornstein and Smo could easily be in the top 10 bosses and perhaps one of the greatest duo bosses to ever exist. I would say that they shit all over Frida and Father Ariandel and Lothric and Lorien from Dark Souls 3. I would say that they're better than Theseus and Asterius from Hades. I would say that they're better than Magni and Modi from God of War, and definitely better than any duo fight in Elden Ring. This can definitely wait until a later video, but Elden Ring has some of the worst duo bosses in the history of the franchise, and that's saying something with twin Dragon Riders being in existence. Ornstein and Smo just complement each other so well and serve as a major challenge together. I'd say that the boss fight actually gets worse when one of them dies. I opt to kill Smo, but that's because I want the Leo ring, and Solaire stabs Smo in the ass to finish him off for me anyway. Now Ornstein takes Smo's power and we slowly have to chip him away. Ornstein hits harder, but really isn't that much faster. In fact, most of his attacks can easily be dodged, so hooray, I guess. His defense is huge though, so this is actually a war of attrition, and I'm cutting down on 12 minutes of fighting here. Plus, sometimes his AI is just jank. Like, check this out. The hell is that? There's almost 30 seconds of butt slams. Well, we finally put the 2 champion defenders down and collect our reward.
Come hither, child.
No, not that. This. Now we have the ability to warp around the world to our semi-heart's content. This marks the point where our NPC quests progress once more, and also the point where the game becomes more linear. Huzzah? Warping back to Firelink Shrine has us meet Sigurd. He's on the next leg of his adventure, but I want to pause it here to clarify something. The NPCs that we meet on the way and indeed help or hinder all have their own goals. For example, Solaire says,
Now that I am undead, I have come to this great land, the birthplace of Lord Gwyn, to seek my very own son.
And Sigmar is really no different. They each have a motivation. Sigmar is seeking out danger to be a brave adventurer, earn respect and be prideful in those achievements, and so far we've halted that progress twice now. One in helping Sens Fortress with the gates and the boulders, and the other one with the Silver Knights. He's now going to move to Blighttown and we can help him there, then Lost Izalith, and we can help him there too. In Lost Izalith, if we help him to the point where he doesn't almost die, he'll lose his pride and resolve, and now with nothing left turn hollow, at which point he'll go mad, and his daughter Siglindi will have to kill him. However, if we let him get close to death when helping him in Lost Izalith, he will succumb to his wounds as a proud hero. Solaire follows a similar path with his inability to find his inner son. He'll lose his sanity and slowly become possessed by a sunlight maggot and go mad. There are of course ways to help them and bypass all of that crap, but they never really end positively, which sort of highlights a key story point, and that is that this world is bleak and doesn't have much greatness or much to celebrate within it, and it has been like that for a long time. The reason why I'm telling you this now is because I may or may not get a chance to do these NPC quest lines, but they're intertwined with your own journey in quite a creative and melancholic way. It's actually quite brilliant how you can interact with these characters and help or hinder their progress. We restore Firelink Bonfire by placing Anastasia, the Firekeeper's soul back, upgrade our Estus, and then head to Framped, and he rejoices that we are the first within 1,000 years to have gone this far. That, hopefully, gives you some perspective as to how long the world has been decaying for and how long the embers have been burning out. We place the Lord Vessel on the altar and the paths open up to us. The Tomb of the Giants, the Duke's Archives, and Lost Izalith. Our new goal is laid out to us in this formula that is similar across the franchise. To achieve our next goal, we must overcome 4 more obstacles. I have a hard time putting into words this formula for the most part, but I'm going to give it a shot. Let's say the formula follows a Section A, B, C, and D format. Section A has you begin the game with an initial goal. Once that goal is complete, we move to Section B, and that is the revelation that this was only the beginning. We then need to collect a key item to move on to Section C, which is effectively utilizing that object to access 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 bosses or call or important enemies to gain access to the endgame, Section D. Each iteration of From Software's games follows this formula, even if it's quite loose at times. Right now we're at Section C. Utilizing the Lord Vessel to access different areas to collect the Soul of Lords to satiate the Lord Vessel. The 4 Kings in New Londo Ruins, the Witch of Izalith in Lost Izalith, Gravelord Nito down in the Tomb of the Giants, and finally Seath the Scaleless up in the Duke's Archives. We can go in any direction, in any order we want, but I opt for the 4 Kings first as I hate them the most, but we need an object before that. Honestly, I'm thankful that this section isn't going to be too long to analyse, and the reason for this is because online multiplayer for the most part is dead or extremely difficult to use. You see, back when I played this game on PC for the first time, which was roughly 2015, you needed something called DSCM, or the Dark Souls Connectivity mod, in order to make it easier to connect with friends or people. Unlike Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring, there's no menu with a password function to be able to easily connect with a given person. Instead, online was just server-based, and there used to be all sorts of weird tips and tricks you could use to try to connect with as many people as possible. These ranged from things like opening your NAT type, or dropping your summon sign at the same time as someone else, or being in the exact same area, in the same covenant, the same level, etc, etc. But now, gone. This whole time I've been on this video commentary analysis, I've been online and not once have I seen a sign or bloodstain or anything like that, but this can be explained. On Tuesday the 22nd of October 2022, a post was made by From Software on Steam regarding the online nature of the Prepare to Die edition, and reminder that this is not remastered. The post reads as follows. We've been working to restore the online service for the Prepare to Die edition that was released in 2012. However, we are no longer able to provide this service due to the aging of the system. We apologise for the long wait and ask for your understanding in this matter. We would also like to thank all of our players who have played the game for so long since its launch. So that's it. Servers can't stay open forever, I suppose. Nevertheless, we move on to discussion about covenants, something that I never really care for that much in these games. I usually find the Sunlight Covenant and stay in that for ages. There are 9 covenants in total, and they fall under 2 or 3 different categories. We have miscellaneous, co-op, and PvP. For miscellaneous, you've got the Daughters of Chaos. For co-op, you have the Warriors of Sunlight, the Princess Guard, and the Way of White. For PvP, you have the Dark Wraiths, the Path of the Dragon, the Grave Lord's Servants, the Blades of the Dark Moon, and the Forest Hunters. The footage that you're currently seeing in the background now is me in Darkroot Garden making my way to the Forest Hunters rep, Alvina. Each covenant has a ranking system of 0, +1, +2, and +3, and certain criteria need to be met in order to gain a rank. For example, with the Forest Hunters, you need to kill 10 trespassers of the Darkroot Forest to get to +1, or for Warriors of the Sunlight, you hand over 10 Sunlight Medallions to rank up to +1. Alas, a lot of them do focus around online connectivity, so I can barely show any of them except for 1 or 2, but that's it really. Covenants back in the heyday were great. Having 2 Sunbros help you out, or being invaded by a Dark Wraith and having a Blade of Dark Moon help you out was incredible, especially as that sort of thing doesn't exist within the game's predecessor. It felt like you were more connected to this world and to others in the world, if even for a moment, regardless of the choppy connections. We're effectively here to dispose of Sif so we can collect the Covenant of Artorias to traverse the abyss where the 4 kings reside deep below New Londo ruins. At this point, if I finish the DLC and help Sif in the past, I'd be met with a different introduction to the fight, but that's actually awfully complex for where I'm at now. I would, in summary, need to go to Darkroot Basin to kill the Hydra, then rescue Dusk from a Crystal Golem, then go to the Duke's Archives to find a pendant from another Crystal Golem, go to the Darkroot Basin, enter and complete the DLC, beating the core bosses there, all the while rescuing and summoning Sif during the penultimate fight of the DLC, then return here. Sif isn't all that difficult. Like most bosses in the game, it actually doesn't hurt that much to hug it up close. They do a fair chunk of damage too and can hit through a shield block. I actually think magic works quite well against Sif, but as you can clearly see, I have no magic at all. Not really much to this boss fight, and in fact there really isn't too much to any of these boss fights in the game, but that again is a conversation for later. For now, we claim the Covenant of Artorias, a ring that allows us to traverse the abyss in the New Londo ruins. Oh yeah, I forgot about the Crestfallen Warrior. Well, he went hollow. Let's see how strong he is and how he... Oh, he just killed himself. There's that AI having no self-preservation again. As I run through New Londo ruins, I want to talk about and analyze the story, and buckle up because this might be controversial. So we know the story now, well enough to a degree. In summary, the world of Dark Souls is a world of cycles. Kingdoms, lands, and ages will come and go, and even time can end and restart as the flame fades and is renewed. These cycles are linked to the first flame, a mysterious manifestation of life that divides and defines separate states, such as hot and cold and life and death, as mentioned in the beginning. And as the first flame fades, these differences also begin to fade, such as life and death having little distinction and humans becoming undead. Age of Darkness brings on undeath, the muddling of time and space, lands collapsing and converging, and overall just a whole bunch of nasty stuff. To avoid this and keep the Age of Fire going, a powerful soul must kindle themselves with the first flame to be fuel for another Age of Fire. If this isn't done, the Age of Dark will begin and a new first flame will burst from that darkness. Again, cycles. The chosen undead, or the player, are tasked with ringing the bells of awakening, collecting the Lord vessels, slaying those who Gwyn bequeathed his soul to, offering those souls to open the path to the kiln of the first flame, and given a platform to make their choice. Fire or dark. Now, again, that's just a summary, but we need to analyze. Within the world of Dark Souls, you are the most important character that exists in the story bar none, since you generally kill any people or beings of significance remaining. You alone have the choice on whether or not you want to push the world into the next stage or maintain it. The Souls games in general dish out their story throughout item descriptions and anything pertinent that appears on a loading screen, chance encounters with people who remain in the world that are safe to interact with, and through indirect environmental storytelling. An example of this environmental storytelling is the disparity between Anor, Londo and Blighttown. The construction and compilation of Lordran itself lends credence to the environmental storytelling of how the gods built their world ahead and above the ashes of the old world, and how they look down upon those more miserable and less fortunate humans or creatures. That right there is never really explained to us directly. It's something that we must infer from their implication. Another example of this, not in Dark Souls 1, but instead Elden Ring, is in Leyndell, where there is this giant helix spear through a corpse of a dragon. Again, an example of indirect environmental storytelling. However, at its core, the story of Dark Souls 1 is not very well written. My belief of a strongly written story, especially one for a Souls universe, is one where there is a set of established events and rules within it that are displayed to us and then must steer us in the direction of how that has come to affect the world we live in and the character we roleplay. There is a myriad of things in the game that I'm okay not really needing to know. For example, I don't have to know why Quelaag and the Fair Lady are only horrific amalgamations from the waist down. I also don't have to know why all the Firekeepers are women. I, however, am not okay with not having a reasonable and rational explanation as to why they thought they could recreate the first flame and why the characters wanted to be involved with such a task, given that it actually spawned the Chaos Flame and from that demons came and caused the curse of the undead. I think it's unforgivable to not know why Seath believed that he could achieve immortality behind affixing scales to himself, let alone crystal scales. I would also like to know why the Everlasting Dragons had a weakness to Gwyn's convenient lightning. These are all catastrophic events within the game's story and are never explored further, which is important because the fact is our character is central to that world now. Now we as a player or a character just have to sit here with a whole bunch of meaningful events that simply just happened that were no longer further explained or developed, and that's supposed to be good story writing? This isn't to say that the way the story is delivered isn't valuable or good, because people find value in anything, really. Hell, some people find making lamps out of toenails valuable, I'm sure of it. However, objectively, Dark Souls 1 lacks a consistent set of story rules that simply tries to immerse you in a nice and neat world. I believe that it fits on a weird and delicate seesaw. If you give the player too much of the story, perhaps you take away from the freedom of exploration from the player and uncovering of the story. If you don't give the player or people enough of a story, then there definitely is no concrete rules and storylines. There will be plot holes. These plot holes and questionable decisions in the story, be they large or small, few or many, really make you think deeply, and the ones that are apparent within the Dark Souls world display moments where these things were brushed over because of laziness or the convenience of time, or perhaps were just never expanded on at all. There are numerous reasons as to why that might be the case, like maybe they wanted the player to fill in the gaps with their own interpretation, but that still speaks objectively to quality. Having a story with many gaps and covering those gaps with the caveat of, oh well, it's up to your interpretation, is lazy writing, and realistically there are a lot of things within the Souls series that just really don't make sense at all. Ugh, oh well. I feel like the conversation from here just gets less important, funnily enough, but after equipping the Covenant of Artorias, we traverse the Abyss to begin the Four Kings fight, the first of the Lord Soul Holders. This boss can actually be done prior to gaining the Lord Vessel, considering they have no yellow fog blocking the way. You can realistically go from the Undead Asylum to Firelink Shrine, to the Undead Burg, to Darkroot Garden, to kill Sif, then to Firelink Shrine, then to New Londo Ruins and kill this boss. Either way, I really wouldn't recommend it, because these guys can be quite annoying. Luckily, dodging them is easy enough. Once they go down, we're the owner of a brand new shiny 25% of Gwyn Soul. I want to talk about music and sound first, and then commentate Izalith and the Bed of Chaos afterwards. The composer of the Dark Souls soundtrack is Motoi Sakaruba, and I know for sure I just butchered his name, so I apologize, buddy, I really do. Music and sound are really difficult subjects to nail down within the Souls game, because for the most part there's really no background music at all, which at this current point in time I feel isn't that out of place. But when you consider heavy-hitting, impactful games of the age in which it arrived, let's say 2011 and 2012, it is clear that not having background music was far more of a foreign idea. For example, Skyrim, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Mass Effect 2 and Uncharted 3 all have background music that will continuously play to set the scene. Dark Souls just simply doesn't have that. It has ambient sound of the world to draw you in, and the only music really is for the character creation, any Firekeeper hub areas, boss battles, and end credits. I mean, shit, just listen to the ambient sound as I walk to the Ceaseless Discharge. This is something that Dark Souls does quite well. As a result of this, the boss music should be reflective in some way of the boss itself and the context in which they appear. By this I mean that if you end up fighting a boss that you forged a connection with and then had to betray that connection to continue forward on your destiny, then the music should reflect that melancholy or bittersweetness. Adding to this, if you ended up fighting a demon, there should be in some way a demonic sounding score to accompany that. Dark Souls 1 does this fine enough, but it has moments of horribleness. The thing is, Dark Souls 2 and 3 have memorable or contentious boss music, and I'm going to cover those when I get to those respective games, but Dark Souls, aside from a few tracks, are really neither here nor there. There are a few tracks on the OST that are really great at drawing you in, and here are my 4 amazing standout examples. Then there are those soundtracks that just sound too damn similar or just too damn forgettable. I want you to be honest with me here. Whose soundtrack do you think this is? I understand the demonic inspiration behind a lot of the score, but there are only so many times you can hear a deep moaning chant sound in the game and not be fed up with it. At any rate, I would argue that the ambient sound is great. They made improvements on it in the DLC, and I can cover that a little in there, but for now we can head to the Darkroot garden and listen to the ambient sound at night. Or to Ulasil. Or even back to Izalith. The sounds of the nature draw you into the world enough. Anyway, fuck this orange. I know in the remastered version they toned down the brightness on it, but the contrast absolutely ruins my eyes, and I really want to apologise in advance here. Izalith is littered by these dragon butts, but the technical term for them are called bounding demons. I never did go to the painted world of Ariamis, but there's an undead dragon there which has this butt as a whole enemy. They just copy and paste it as an asset here. I actually really love the aesthetic of Izalith, and in fact that sentiment is shared across many of the games that have frost-covered or lava-covered areas in the series. For example, Broom Tower and the Smouldering Lake. So it's such a shame that a lot of Izalith won't be explored. These dragon butts are annoying to kill, and there's not really that much of a reward for them. Throughout the ruins of Izalith, there are these demon statues which breathe fire at you. Honestly, these guys are a pretty one-dimensional enemy, and I feel like there could be more to their moveset, or perhaps just use them as things to obstruct your path or blend in with the surroundings. Right before the boss, we see a Witch of Izalith, one of the sisters. I'm not really sure about the lore on this one, but Kirk tries to get a piece of it too, and I let him know who's the boss for the third time now. As this is the final time we'll kill Kirk, his corpse and his armor will be available to be collected next to the Fair Lady. Onwards is the path that the Daughters of Chaos can use if they're a part of the Covenant and give up 30 humanity to the Fair Lady. It is here we see Solare's grim end.
My very own son. I am the sun.
Interestingly enough, Solare's armor and gear say that there are no inherent holiness or special nature about them, and that Solare was just a regular bloke with exceptional skill, and now he's met his end. It sort of underlines the tone of the game as a whole, where there really isn't much to celebrate and be happy about. Sigmar would also be here, but I didn't help him in Blighttown, so there's a good chance that he's dead. Finally, the Bed of Chaos. I would argue that this is the worst boss in the entire FromSoft Souls-like library. Bonus point for trying something new and being a bit more environmental, but that's really all it has going for it. The boss will attack you with swipes that hurt you, which all in all isn't the problem here. The problem is that these swipes, even if they do chunk your health down, push you about fucking 50 feet backwards, and then when the floor starts to collapse, it's extremely easy to be knocked off on the edge. I get lucky and only die once at this boss, but I remember subsequent playthroughs where I died 5 or more times to falling alone. I actually get really lucky too, as it hits me as I jump down onto the main tree root, but it only manages to damage me rather than push me again. Finally we kill that fucking bug and now hold 50% of the soul mass we need to finish the game. So I skipped ahead of the catacombs as I already killed Pinwheel, and I entered the Tomb of the Giants, an infinitely dark and imposing location in the world. Luckily, because I did Izalith prior, I have what is called a sunlight maggot, which is a hat that I can wear to cast light into the darkness. Look, I really like the idea of the Tomb of the Giants, but it could really use some love. I feel like there are some aspects of this area that are missing, but there really isn't too much here to point out what exactly went wrong. The concept of a pitch black environment within a video game is a really hard one to tackle, given that it performs the opposite of what we're meant to do in a game world. See. Without the sunlight maggot, there's a solid chance that one would walk off of a cliff edge and die during this section. And this segues nicely into the environment, and by environment I'm pertaining to all aspects. This is the interactable world, the enemy placement, item placement, and hell, even trapdoors and bonfires too, as well as NPCs.
This is what I do, my friend. The trinkets I'll be stripping off your corpse, that's the real treasure.
The Dark Souls environment is really tricky to pin with a few single thoughts. Firstly, the literal locations are varied and connect extraordinarily well from those areas that they were designed for you to warp out, like I mentioned before. Dark Souls' environments are in part distinguished by their emphasis on focal points. These lend your journey's progression a rich visual drama and spatial perspective. You have distinct things to look forward to and distinct things to look back upon once you're there. Although the world is interconnected, it can easily and enjoyably be divided into distinct rooms or spaces. Dark Souls, obviously, has no map for us to consult, yet the general consensus seems to be that navigating Lordran on its own terms works fine anyway. Games nowadays have invisible walls that block off areas that should logically be accessible, but Dark Souls takes the opposite approach, whereby you can head in any given direction and, well, mostly at least, get out what you put in. Navigating this world and the enemies within it is not exactly a science or even that engaging at times, given that there are no dedicated traversal actions besides using ladders, which, in and of itself, is infrequent. Think about Sekiro and how often we needed to use our grappling hook to get around, or how often we needed to swim. Beyond that, most actions we do is walking, running, jumping, or falling, far from anything context-specific really. I'll speak about enemies properly later on, but I want to quickly talk about my opinion here. The first time one would encounter a Black Knight or Silver Knight or whatever fucking knight you're likely going to be running into is in the Undead, Burg, or the Parish. Each location one is in a narrow, small pathway, and defeating that enemy is complex and frustrating. Fighting against the enemy here and against the environment is clunky and shit. But fast forward towards the later half of the game, and we verse knights in larger areas and realise that they're not difficult at all. And yes, I am setting aside the fact that we have grown as a player in terms of our levels. I'm talking about the fact that their patterns aren't complex, and they're not even particularly fast or clever like most of the AI are in this game. Their difficulty was illusionary. Enemies towards the end of the game, including the leveling we've done, are effectively fodder given the natural progression of your character, and they only function as competent enemies in the context of other enemies and an environmental layout that play to their strengths. As such, the positioning of enemies is extremely important, and in a game that is interconnected and can wind back on itself like Dark Souls 1 can, it is even more so. You see, games generally follow a linear path where you might have a mission or a dungeon or areas that you go from point A to point B. For example, in Red Dead Redemption 2, you have missions that occur where you start at a point and finish at another, with enemies being in given locations that are relevant to the path you can take, as you can't really deviate too far from that set path. Another example is Skyrim, where you have barrows or dungeons that have only one entry point and generally a hidden exit point. The enemies are in, arguably, strategically positioned areas. If you want an example that's a little more close to home, then we have Demon Souls. No matter which archstone you start at, be it World 1-1, 2-2, or 4-1, you run from point A to point B in a linear fashion with enemies in strategic positions. In games like Dark Souls, especially towards the earlier sections, this isn't exactly as possible as you would like. If I were to head backwards through the Darkroot garden, I'd run into some enemies that are in weird positions. If I were to run backwards from Blighttown into the depths, there would be some enemies that are far easier to deal with because they're in different and easier positions. This is because, and hear me out here, it is incredibly difficult to have enemies placed in positions that cater to you approaching it from all possible directions. Ironically though, you only really need to kill 40 or 50 enemies, bosses in total to complete the game, so, be that as it may. Finally, the world. The graphics, ambient sound, and things that fill it are gorgeous, barring a few areas. The fact that you're able to actually see the demon ruins and lost Izalith from the Tomb of the Giants is breathtaking, displaying just how important having a world that feels like a world is. Each area is different from the next and, for the most part, seamlessly connects with its neighbour without any horribly jarring examples. Having a graveyard or a catacomb near an area of respite is not a foreign concept. Progressing downwards to a catacomb and then to an ancient tomb is also believable. Having a high, golden city atop the masses that is only accessible after proving your worth within a fortress makes sense. Having a city that leads into a sewer that leads to a chamber then further down to the core of the world is glorious, and these are just a few examples that are picked at random. I really have nothing else to say, as commenting about the world enters the world of subjectivity. As some people could say it sucks because the lava's too orange, or that the trees don't have enough polygons. I realistically shouldn't be keeping this section in, killing Paladin Leroy. It sort of feels like it's, not fair. Once again, the NPCs in this game display the complete ineptitude at killing us. Regardless, the Tomb of the Giants is our second last area, and our final necromancer is Gravelord Nito, the one who found the Soul of Death and who has been given 25% of Gwyn's soul. His fight isn't too bad unless you do what I do and piss off all the skeletons around. Luckily, Nito kills his own, so sticking near him means that his sword swipes will take out some of his friends if you can dodge them. He can also cause toxic, so please bring a bunch of blooming moss clumps to get rid of that shit. After hacking and slashing him a whole bunch, he goes down, and now we have 75% of Gwyn's soul. 3 down, 1 to go. Prior to the next area, I decided to prep for the DLC. It's actually friggin' annoying, but most of the people who stumbled across it probably already did the requirements without really realizing it. But because I haven't done any, I have to start from square one. In short, I had to head to the Darkroot Basin, kill the Hydra, quit out. Reload, then run back to the water area to find a crystal golem that's gold and kill it, which frees Dusk of Ulasil. Talk to her, then quit out. Reload, then head back to the shoreline near the Hydra, summon her, talk to her and exhaust her dialogue. Quit out. And reload, and then there will be an abyssal portal where the crystal golem was. Can't do anything about it till you head to the Duke's Archives anyway, so here we go. On the way to the Duke's Archives and subsequent Crystal Cave, there are 2 armoured boars that are annoying as fuck to get past. Ideally, if you can run past both of them, you have a pillar that you can put in between you and it, and then you're pretty sweet. The enemies within this area are crystallised due to Seath's experiments. They generally have a lot more defense than a standard enemy, but not really too much health. Coincidentally, they seem to be weaker to thrusting attacks. Not really sure what element they might be weak to. Lightning is my guess. Right at the intro, there's a random crystal golem just chilling here. Well, all of that footage I put in prior about prepping for the DLC comes from this bloke here. Upon his death, we get a broken pendant, which is our DLC accessing item. We can finally head back to the portal to access the DLC. But we'll do that later. The Archives is a little annoying, but in all honesty, it's probably my favourite area in the post-Lord Vessel game. I enjoy how it's set out. The enemies can be annoying in the way you need to interact with the world. For example, changing the staircase orientation is actually a little bit refreshing. It sounds really odd, but in comparison to the other areas like Lost Izalith, Tomb of the Giants and New Londo Ruins, the next best thing we can do to change the orientation of the world is drain the water from New Londo. I would have loved to have seen more outside of the castle areas that don't head down into the caves, but it's whatever. We find an elevator and head up, finding an NPC in the stairwell on the way up. This crystal NPC is just as dumb as all the other ones. Honestly, I'm sort of sick of talking about the AI in this game, and it seems really archaic in comparison to later games. Well, I know what's on the other side of this door, so I prep accordingly, putting on a ring of sacrifice. And something that people don't know is you can actually exit the fog door too. But to continue forward, we have to die. In we go. Well, we die. Just like I said. And get transported to a jail holding cell. I'm gonna be honest with you. I have no idea what the fucking purpose of this area is. Is it meant to act like a jail cell so Seath can have no enemies or no aggressors? At this point in time, I sort of try to rationalize that as he is the last remaining Lord Soul holder, he probably fears that his time is drawing to an end, therefore he takes countermeasures against us. Either way, it's a fucking dumb idea and it's a dumb area despite the fact that I actually don't mind exploring it. The enemies here consist of snake men. Yep, you heard me. The ones we've seen before. And these weird tentacle creatures called Pisaka. Pisaka? Who knows? I believe they're just more experiments, but the noises they make and the design of them lends credence to Bloodborne themed enemies. We have to make our way down here to get a key from a chest to go back to the main area of the archives. Why? If what I said was real and not actually a made up scenario, then why the hell would Seath even keep a key there to begin with? Logan is in jail and needs to be rescued again. Well, bad luck, buddy. Not coming to save you again. You can fucking die. This place is a bit nostalgic given the number of times that I would sit at this very bonfire and help people with Seath. Back in the day, people wanted to get the Moonlight Greatsword from his tail, which I believe was needed for a trophy, but don't quote me on that. Using the stairs as mentioned before, we spin it around and head down the ladder to unlock the bookshelf, and indeed a shortcut advancing forward. We grab some prism stones which help light the way, and they serve somewhat of a fickle purpose in the crystal caves. Right here, in fact. The gimmick of this area is that there are invisible platforms. The 3D model world shows me that there are some here and here, but in-game the only real way to see is by observing the starlight bouncing off of it or chucking prism stones down. If it screams, it's a fatal fall. Well, here we are, Seath the Scaleless, and a great chance to talk about boss battles because my god do I have some thoughts. I'm actually going to separate these thoughts into past context and present context. First, past context. Back in 2011 and 2012, the only game that was similar in style was Demon's Souls. For most people on PC or Xbox, Dark Souls 1 was in fact their first Dark Souls game of any kind. And what this meant was that there was a bit of an adjustment period to get into the swing of things. In comparison to boss design from Demon's Souls, these bosses are much more varied and far more difficult. In fact, I'd say that there are only a few bosses in Demon's Souls that would translate well into this game, and that would be the Flame Lurker and the False King, or maybe Made in Australia, but that's really neither here nor there. Those bosses were aggressive, hit hard, and had additional things to worry about. For example, Flame Lurker's Flame Cloak and False King's Soul Sucker and Speed and Garl Vinland with Made in Australia. For the most part, bosses in Demon's Souls are a face roll, so the jump from there to here is actually quite enormous. Cannot tell you how many times Sif killed me, or how many times the Four Kings just piled on my ass, or how difficult I found Ornstein and Smoke. The bosses ranged from accessible yet tough to difficult and frustrating, and the jump in difficulty from Demon's Souls to Dark Souls was noticeable and unquestionable. In terms of design, they jumped as equally in quality. Bosses didn't have one-dimensional attacks. At least at the time, they felt like they had a huge pool of attacks to kill us, and even surprise us, like Ornstein and Smoth's boss fight phase 2. Bosses just felt good because they were tough, but fair, equally aggressive and passive, and punished errors. However, they were relatively tuned for their arena and environment. For example, if you ran around with Nito, you would aggro the skeletons, making this fight more difficult. If you missed the channeler at the Gaping Dragon, then he would buff it. Hell, if you were slack with the Taurus Demon, you could get smacked off of the ledge. I think the beauty of them is that there are very little gimmicks to the fights, and the game generally wants you to duke it out as a one-on-one and learn their patterns, unlike Dark Souls 3. Despite this, experience trumps difficulty, and this is where we move on to the present context. For the past 3 minutes I've been running around in circles trying to get Seath's tail to cut it off, and he's done barely anything about it. There are a lot of bosses in this game that in hindsight are pretty poop. While recording a lot of this playthrough, I streamed it to a friend, to which their sentiment at the bosses was, wow, I actually thought that they were much more difficult than that. They simply remembered them being difficult. We've been utterly spoiled with the increase in boss quality from Dark Souls 1 to 2, from Dark Souls 2 to Bloodborne, from Bloodborne to Dark Souls 3, and from Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring. I would include Sekiro here, but that game type, while similar, is far too different to compare as naturally. But the fact of the matter is, bosses in Dark Souls 1 are not difficult, and for the most part, not even that interesting. The only noteworthy bosses in this game, in my opinion, are Ornstein and Smoth, maybe another one here or there, and the DLC bosses, but I'll speak about them during that section. The best part about Dark Souls 1 actually aren't its bosses at all. It comes from the way that these games force us to play and force us to relearn the ways that we do things. We really are just being expected to take our time around the world and its surroundings, and even the bosses. We have to adapt, remember, plan, and execute. We have the ability now as players to take it easy, as these things are far more ingrained in us. Whereas in Dark Souls 3, the battles aren't about that as much. It's a display of excellence and talent to pay attention to all facets of the boss. It's about tracking phases, using items to your advantage. It's about being able to dance with the boss in an epic duel that's more than just an attack fest. I suppose whenever I get to Dark Souls 3, if I ever do, I can elaborate on that more and analyse some more examples there. But the death of Seath the Scaleless means we now have 100% of the souls needed to satiate the Lord Vessel and open the Kiln of the First Flame. But we have some errands to run first. Making our way back to that weird portal where dusk was, we've been grabbed by a hand, Manus's hand, and now head back in time to a world that once was, roughly 200 to 300 years ago. Right off of the bat, we have a boss, the Guardian of Ulaseel's Sanctuary, also known as the Sanctuary Guardian. Alright, well that's a pretty funny play on words, but actually I really like this boss. It's quite unique by Dark Souls 1 standards, even for a beast, and it uses its area really well. Fun fact that this arena will soon be the graveyard with Artorias' grave, the same one where we fought Sith. The Sanctuary Guardian is modelled after a mythical manticore, and I think it does a beast fight really well. It's relatively easy to read its combos, it does decent damage, it can jump, fly away, it's fast, and it uses lightning attacks. It also can use its scorpion tail to poison you, but it never really does that for me. Interestingly enough, the lightning attacks are conducted by the water, so you have to be careful of the splash damage. I sort of wish this arena was a little smaller, or the water a smidge deeper, or it utilised its moveset more for it to be a truly formidable boss. Also, again, a really great soundtrack. Running off of the same topic as last section, I do remember this boss being much harder back then than it is now. I think that if a lot of the demonic or bestial bosses that Dark Souls 1 have had the same type of aggression and varied moveset or environment and arena that played to their strengths as the Sanctuary Guardian, the boss roster as a whole would be a lot stronger. Honestly, just think about the Taurus Demon and how few moves it has. Same with the Carper Demon, same with Quelaag, same with Iron Golem. You get the picture. Now we've made it into Ulysseel's sanctuary, and we find a giant mushroom named Elizabeth, who is Dusk's guardian. She needs saving again, or is this the first time? This right here is the Royal Wood, which is basically the Darkroot garden, but back in a time when the Abyss was still hanging around more obviously. The enemies that are placed within it are these gardeners and stoned guardians. Honestly, I wish there was more to say about this place, but there isn't. It's the Darkroot garden that existed 200 years ago. Perhaps the gardeners slowly became those bushes that we see in the Darkroot garden over time. At the very least, it's nice to see a familiar area within a DLC, especially if there's time traveling present, but I do have an issue with how little areas are actually in the DLC. What confuses me though is that shortly beyond the Royal Wood is Ulysseel Township, which effectively occupies where the Undead Parish would be, yet it's now transformed to be above ground more than below ground. Why is it that the Royal Wood and Darkroot Garden is almost a one-to-one reimagining, but the rest of Ulysseel is butchered and disappeared? Surely the entirety of Darkroot Basin is not Ulysseel. I get it though, lands come and go with the cycle of time in this game, but if that's the case, why hasn't the Royal Wood? That was Abyss touched in parts too. But a quick side note about DLCs and purchasing. I for one am not really a big fan on spending additional money on a game or even pre-ordering things or getting into early access games. As I've gotten older, my priorities have changed to where I feel that a game should be, or at least as best as it can be, a complete package upon purchase. When I was younger, I could save up my chore money and buy Tekken 3 or Croc or Crash Bandicoot and know that that was the completed game, even if it did have bugs. No DLCs or no microtransactions, nothing. But Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, and even soon to be Elden Ring all have or will have downloadable content. I'm sort of torn because I know I'm part of the problem when I purchased the DLC of these Souls series, but I really do wish they could have completed the game and then sold it as a full package. At the very least, nowadays I'm really hesitant to purchase games right away, given that some of them are just flat out fucked from day one and require huge patches to even be remotely playable. This NPC right here is Chester. Interesting fellow really, a man from the future dragged into the past, much like us. He wears clothes very reminiscent of a hunter from Bloodborne. His clothes are Victorian after all. He sports an overcoat, a vest and a jacket with pants rather than armor, and even has thrown bleeding projectiles and a quick step melee with a sweep kick. Actually, in Bloodborne there's a corpse near the cathedral ward with a set similar to Chester's armor, and an amygdala grabs you if you stand near it. Perhaps Chester was grabbed there and teleported here? Yeah, I know, that sounds really damn crazy actually.
He's a colorless sort, if you ask me.
Now onto the penultimate fight of the Royal Wood, Knight Artorias. Now this is what I'm talking about when I mention boss fights in the DLC being overall higher quality than in the main game. I mentioned that most of the bosses in this game feel like an epic duel, and this is absolutely no exception. This is a legendary knight, albeit handicapped and abyss touched, but still legendary nonetheless. Let's just look at how his attack style differs from some of the main game bosses. Unfortunately, he must die for us to progress, and as he dies, we hear an ominously human scream. Slightly beyond the Artorias battleground is Ulyssil Township proper. This is the method in which we progress even deeper into the abyssal depths. The enemies that populate this area, and even the ones below, are these bloated undead and bloated mages. By exploring this area well enough, we are met with a developer sign on the ground. Let there be light. This illusionary wall is different from most as it won't open when we attack it, but instead opens when we use light. So I equip my sunlight maggot and we're rewarded with a silver pendant. It is a useful and interesting item that repels dark or abyssal spells and is very useful against some enemies in Ulyssil and definitely against Manus. Progressing down, the enemies begin to have glowing red eyes, which signals that they're stronger than previous iterations. This means we need to be even more wary of enemies that litter the area, as they will chunk my health or stamina down at a much higher rate, leaving me open to death. Jumping across this breezeway and killing a mimic nets me a crest key, which opens the door above Artorias' battleground to Hawkeye Goff. We mentioned him before, actually. He is instrumental with helping us with a boss later on, but we'll come back to that. At the very least, he thanks us for freeing Artorias.
An old friend he was. Thanks to thee, he left this world with honor intact.
Now, back into the abyss of Ulyssil. We are greeted with a horde of these humanity-type enemies. I actually really like the enemies at a conceptual level, but they're fucking frustrating at a gameplay level. They hit really hard, and even through defense, and your depth perception is off when attacking them, because you never really know how close they are. Falling through the floor here is annoying and weird. I hate the unidentifiable, collapsible pieces of scenery, but at least the floor's enchanted for us to not take damage. In the distance, we spot Alvina, who leads us to Sif, that we free once the enemies are clear. It is at this point that Sif will be able to help us in the fight with Manus. Believe it or not, I really like this area of the DLC, but I wish it was able to be lit up a bit more. The use of a skull lantern or sunlight maggot providing a bit more of a clear picture would have been a nice, neat little touch. Side note, Dark Souls 2 had the torch system that was meant to be utilised as a core mechanic for the game. Most of the game might have been near the darkness of Tomb of the Giants, with the players needing to give up a shield slot to illuminate their way. I actually really would have loved to have seen them do something like that in this area, as sometimes the only indication that there's anything in the distance are the glowing eyes of an enemy or a prism stone on the floor. Speaking of prism stones, they lead us down to a drop, then to a fog door which leads us to Manus, the penultimate boss of the DLC. So little in the game is actually directly spelled out to the players, and it's my understanding that Manus is not the furtive pygmy. We know that in Dark Souls 3 there are the pygmy kings that have the dark soul that Gale is collecting at the edge of the world in the Ringed City. But then again, given the pygmy had the dark soul and split it across humanity, and Manus being clearly once human according to his soul description, he could be involved somehow. At the very least, Manus is central to Dark Souls 2 after his humanity went wild. I'll speak about it more when I get there, but his soul effectively gets split up and each piece seeks a powerful land and a king to slowly corrupt. This fight isn't exactly that difficult, but it is noticeably more challenging than others. He is pretty damn tenacious and aggressive, but luckily his dark spells can be deflected with that silver pendant we found earlier. Sif doesn't do a bad job during this fight either, but sort of really just acts as a damage sponge and a distraction for Manus. With Manus down, the DLC is effectively finished, sparring our optional boss, Calamite. Down the path into the basin, we're toasted alive by a dragon with black and orange fire with seemingly no way to engage him in combat. If we head back to Goff, he says that,
Mara, is the black dragon posing me duress? Yes, I thought as much. He's called Calamite. Ferocious dragon indeed. Even mighty Anor Londo dared not provoke his eye.
and offers to help us. With a giant arrow and true aim, the dragon is downed and we may engage it in combat. Despite the name of the Gaping Dragon before, I would qualify this as the only dragon fight in the game, or at least the only traditional dragon fight in the game. One of the large problems with this boss is the hitboxes, and you'll notice me rolling through Calamite's neck to dodge the head swipes. The hitboxes of the fire are also a bit janky at times and do physical damage as well as fire damage, so it actually can really hurt if you get caught. If you cut off Calamite's tail, you'll get a relatively powerful two-handed sword, which has an area of effect fire attack similar to Calamite's Dragon Breath. It's called the Obsidian Greatsword, and I tell you this now because I definitely don't cut his tail off. Calamite has an interesting attack that also translates into an item it drops upon death. It essentially doubles the damage you take, making the game twice as dangerous. I'm not exactly sure why they would have Calamite drop it, as this is effectively what can be seen as a later point in the game. Perhaps this is for New Game Plus, but who knows really. Calamite's death marks the end of the DLC and the last checkpoint before endgame. The Kiln's an interesting desolate area that effectively is a barren, ashen wasteland. The only thing that litter it are these Black Knights. Killing them will give you a chance at their respective weapon and a coloured Titanite chunk. The Black Knights and Ash are meant to imply that Gwyn burned his knights when he kindled the first flame, and this area can really be seen as two things. One, an area to farm for souls or Titanite chunks to level up you and your weaponry. Two, a run back to the boss. Dark Souls 1 doesn't really have that many examples of large, lengthy runs back to the bosses from the closest bonfire. Putting aside killing or avoiding damage from enemies, nearly each boss run, on average, takes around half a minute to a minute. For example, the Firelink Shrine bonfire to the Bell Gargoyles isn't that long, Blighttown Basin to Quelaag takes roughly a minute, and even Darkroot to Sif is only about 90 seconds, which is similar to Izalith's hidden bonfire to the Better Chaos, and Gwyn in the Kiln. However, the larger runs from bonfires to bosses can take around 2 to 3 minutes and onwards. For example, the Duke's Archives Library to seek the Scaleless, Firelink Shrine to the Four Kings in the New Londo Ruins, and the Tomb of the Giants to Gravelord Nito. I mean, in comparison to some areas in Dark Souls 2, this is a fucking dream, but that's for a later video, and you know what I'm talking about. I wish the Kiln would have been a bit more challenging rather than what it is, given that most of the game's 4 key areas post-Lord Vessel are all in similar difficulty to match with the player's ability to choose any direction first. I know that they ran out of time with Gwyn too, given that the fight is just a shadow of its potential, or perhaps that was a design choice actually. Gwyn himself is, unsurprisingly enough, the last boss of the game. He never says anything to us at all. I'm not really exactly sure of his state of being. Is he hollow? Is he mad? Is he corrupted? It's entirely possible that lore-wise, you're just another person to try their luck at Gwyn in the last 1,000 years. The general consensus is that Gwyn really isn't that difficult of a final boss, and I agree and disagree with this statement. He certainly isn't a pushover. In fact, he killed me a couple of times when I wasn't paying attention. No other boss really did this to me. He's very aggressive and some of his attacks have little to no wind-up, but remarkably enough, he can be parried to make him a tad easier with the right timing. The soundtrack for this boss battle is iconic and poignant. What else can I really say? It's a far cry from the orchestral droning and chanting we may have grown accustomed to with its crescendos and diminuendos. Perhaps this music is a statement piece for the futile or melancholic nature of the world and indeed Gwyn himself. Once he's dead, you can either rekindle the flame and start a new age of fire or bring on the age of darkness. The ending leaves you wondering about what exactly the implications are of such an action, but I sort of like how total it is. Now it's up to you and your interpretation of how the cycle will start anew. This, of course, is wholly a matter of perspective, I suppose, as those who played through the game only to stop after, say, the Capra Demon will think different, but Dark Souls 1 is an experience that has set the scene for the games that follow it. It is the industry gold standard for ARPGs and a gold standard for the way in which a game teaches the player fundamentals through environment and gradual increase of responsibility. It's not so guided. Guidance is fantastic, and the sense of discovery and wonder that come through exploring an unknown and living world and its inhabitants invoke awe, as it feels like, for the most part at least, a living, breathing, cohesive world. The first half of Dark Souls 1 is an absolute dream and is effectively what the later games in the series should have aimed to emulate. What else is there really to say? Is Dark Souls 1 a perfect game? No, in fact it's far from it. But is it a bad game? Again, no, in fact, far from it. Dark Souls 1 is a fantastic game with flaws littered all around it, but the central idea is pretty damn good. The way that the world is interconnected and sequenced is a work of art and, again, should be attempted to be emulated by any future renditions of From Software's IPs. The world and the environment and the way it forces you to interact with it and the enemies is phenomenal in the first half of the game, but falls flat in the second half. Granted, it's extremely difficult to accommodate that given how interconnected the game is initially. The story is quite solid, and the way that the player has agency over what they uncover within it is amazing, but the fact that they gloss over crucial details and important canonical events that affect both us and the world that we traverse is terrible. The bosses, for the time, were great and felt like classic one-on-one duels to the death with a formidable foe, but as we grow as people and players, upon reflection, they seem one-dimensional, oftentimes repeating the same attack for 30 seconds at a time, or seemingly walking in random directions, or just not really having the drive to kill you at all. The way that the AI worked in this game was solid, but they had this ridiculous do or die mentality with seemingly no self-preservation. Again, I've beaten this point into the ground already. It's absolutely clear to see how much they improved upon this with later iterations in the series, ranging from Bloodborne to Dark Souls 3 to Sekiro to Elden Ring. The story of the NPCs and them as individuals are fantastic aspects of this game and have creative and sad stories that interweave throughout your own journey through Lordran, and the score that accompanies the different areas and battles in the game varies in quality from monotonous, annoying and repetitive droning sounds to refreshing and emotional uplifting orchestral scores. The Artorias of the Abyss DLC, or the Prepare to Die edition that comes with it already there, adds and improves upon the core elements of the game. It challenges the player with 4 unique and different bosses from the norm that we face throughout the game, with an engaging beast fight, a great duel between a fallen knight, a slogfest and an intricate dance with the Father of the Abyss, and a traditional and difficult dragon fight. However, the DLC's downfall was its overall lack of variety. Realistically, the DLC had 2 areas. The Royal Wood, which was derived from the Darkroot Garden, and Ulyssil into the Abyss. I didn't touch upon this when I was there, but there is actually a Colosseum PvP style arena. Of course, given the fact that multiplayer is now gone, I was unable to engage with it, so I couldn't really explain it to you, or even critique it in any way, shape or form. Within the DLC, there was also a lack of distinct enemy types that were separate from the bosses. There were Gardeners, Stone Guardians, bloated melee and mages, a weird prisoner, and humanity sprites. Overall, Dark Souls 1 is a great experience, but perhaps nowadays people see it more through a nostalgic lens. I know I certainly do. Upon replaying this for the commentary analysis, I realised that this game meant more to me in experience and memory than it does now, and that's honestly okay. This game, to me, hasn't really aged like fine wine. Regardless though, if you haven't played Dark Souls 1 before, I absolutely urge you to try it, and truthfully I urge everyone to try every bit of video game media that they can. It can do nothing but expand your repertoire of things that you can enjoy, and hopefully you might find that special diamond in the rough that really sucks you in. And on that note, this ends Dark Souls, a commentary analysis. Thanks for watching.